Want to know what your dog is thinking?
Have a challenging dog behavior you need help with?
The Dish on Dogs is your source for all your canine questions.
Improve your relationship with your dog and deepen your understanding of your furry friend. Right here on the Dish on Dogs. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode on the Dish on Dogs, the one and most informative show about dogs, the pet care industry, and humans, humanity and dogs, and how we sometimes clash and sometimes how we get along so wonderfully. I just, obviously, I'm here with the brains of the operation, the ultimate boss. I'm on my best behavior.
That's right.
Jackie's joining me. She's, she has, so we've been so busy moving along and developing the brand. So it's exciting to be with her once again in the studio. Jackie, I had two people on recently, Johannes and Maya from the Farmingdale, New York location. They're employees. It was one of the independently, each one of them, it was one of the most inspirational conversations I ever had. And Cooper will agree. They were like spokespeople for Houndstown, and they articulated their thoughts and dreams and everything so well. They started working in June in the middle of COVID.
Last year.
Last year.
Yeah.
One was a bus driver, Maya, so she couldn't work, obviously, remotely. So she was really affected by it. Johannes got laid off because he was working at a warehouse. Both of them could have taken advantage of unemployment, all kind of stimulus. And the way that they described why they didn't really gives me hope that there's a whole generation of people that just aren't lazy. Their story was incredible. So I encourage everybody to listen to it. Johannes and Maya, Mia, whatever, Mia, Mayo. But no, it was really moving to me because the way they described everything. I mean, Maya talked about going home and reflecting on if she did a good job that day and if she could have done a better temperament test or a better phone call, which is huge.
That's a great employee.
That's great. And the Johannes, the same thing. He talked about how he came to doggy daycare and the energy. So I'm really, obviously, now more impressed with Jen and Maria than I ever have before because it's obviously, and I've always been impressed by that.
Disclaimer.
But what's the odds of two employees coming here? They weren't at gunpoint. It wasn't scripted. I didn't tell them to talk about this and that. And it's just, I can't even believe it. So they have something going on. And as I always say, they are the backbone of our business. And I hope franchisees listening or anybody listening understand when you get an employee like Johannes or Maya, you better hang on to them because they are your business. They are our brand. So we're looking forward to expanding their opportunities in our business because this is it. They don't want to do anything else in life. And anyway, so I wanted to share that with you.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Because I don't get enough time to talk to you, so I'll figure I'll take the podcast.
We'll have a conversation live on the air.
Here. Yeah, we can talk. Right.
Well, let's get into talking about what it is we're going to talk about today, which is obviously related to doggy daycare, dogs, how dogs think, how they see the world. And today we wanted to focus on, because we're getting a lot of questions. We always get a lot of questions from our customers, right? About what are dogs' capabilities? People have difficulties with their dogs in the home with different behavior issues. And often the frustration from that results from a lack of ability to understand where the dog is coming from, right? And from the dog's perspective, it's a lack of understanding what we're asking of them as a leader. So let's talk today about what are dogs' what are their abilities and what are their limitations when it comes to what they understand about our human world.
Right. So that's a great question, and we're doing training now. We're trying to train new franchisees how to do this, right? So we got to transfer our knowledge to people that don't have, frankly, a lot of knowledge about dogs. So we are susceptible or victims of what we read, what we hear, or what we see on TV. So if we see Rin Tin Tin or Lassie or whatever we see, even documentaries on service dogs, and it appears that they can do these amazing mystical things. And in some degree they can, but they also have very specific limitations. Mm-hmm. And I always revert back to very young children, toddlers. Toddlers, 1.5-year-old child, 2-year-old child can do some amazing things. They can walk, they have opposing thumbs, they can pick things up for you, but they can't at that age be able to tell you specific things, right? You could tell I can tell my granddaughter to get me the remote control, and she can do that. But I can't ask her to put on Dancing with the Stars for me because she doesn't have the intellectual capacity to do that. She will someday. She will when she's taught that. But dogs, unfortunately, they're eternal children. So you can tell them to you can train them to get a beer out of open the refrigerator and grab you a beer. That's a relatively simple task. But you can't tell them to get you a Diet Coke or a different brand of beer.
Right.
That's just not happening. And if it is possible, it's going to require an extraordinary amount of training.
Right. And the dog doesn't necessarily understand what is a Diet Coke versus a Coke, right? So they don't have the ability to decipher that,
Right.
but you can obviously train dogs to recognize certain things more than other things and to choose that thing.
Right. And it's a very it's not easy. So we talk about dogs being very smart, but think about the smartest dog. I train police dogs hundreds, months at a time. But if a police dog chases something, it's not going to look both ways. It can't look both ways and make a logical decision across the street, so they get run over.
Right.
So we look at it. I trained police dogs, and I remember clearly in one of my early days, I had a police dog. We were working in Queens, highly populated area, and the dog was trained to do amazing things, pursue somebody running away and apprehending them using their mouth. So that was trained. What they couldn't do, I remember one of my there was a burglary, and people ran from the burglary scene, and my dog focused in on the burglar. And he did what his training told him to do, was chase the person. But he can't be trained to cross the street, so he chased the person across the street. He got hit by a car, not seriously. But the point of the matter is we couldn't train a dog to look both ways and make all these complicated decisions. They're not capable of it. Does that make sense, Jack?
Yeah, and I think that makes sense because as humans, our brains are complicated, right? And we're always talking to our dogs and explaining things to dogs, and part of us knows that this is ridiculous, right? The dog doesn't understand. But I think it crosses the line into frustration and having issues in the house behaviorally when you can't make that communication possible. Right. So when we're trying to communicate the only way we know, and the dog is seemingly not paying attention to us. But the problem really is that the dog doesn't understand what we are asking of him because we are not speaking in dog.
Absolutely. Right. So I've said this many times. So if you had the fortunate opportunity like I do, working with hearing impaired or deaf people, the only way you're going to communicate with them is by learning sign language. So you can yell, you can point, you could try to read to them a book, but it's not happening. So if you learn sign language, then communication becomes very, very simple. And the same thing for dogs. Once you understand their language, but most people, frankly, don't understand it, or they don't take the time to understand what the topic of the show is, the limitations to dogs and what we can do. And frankly, in this day and age, in my humble opinion, we're asking dogs to do more things than they really can do as dogs. Right. They're not psychiatrists. They're not social workers. So, to start putting this, all of these tasks that we want is difficult. They're incapable of it. So when we talk about emotional support and all these types of things, it's not that it's good or bad, but to me, every dog is an emotional support dog. When I pet any dog, happy hormones, dopamine, serotonin, that's released by the dog. A dog can't be taught really to provide that. Does that make sense?
Right, exactly. The dog doesn't have the dog doesn't know that they're like service dogs, right? Or emotional support dogs. They don't know that's they're supplying that complicated support to a human, right? They're just kind of being themselves and trying to follow basic direction. And that's what any domestic dog is trying to do.
Right. And yeah, and again, I used to train service dogs. I used to train them for stability, right? So we hear about stability dogs. You see a German Shepherd or a Lab, a big dog walking around to provide stability to a human that may fall down. And I spent hours, months, and a long time doing this, only to realize that I'm putting why should the 70-pound dog there are things, we already have inventions. We have walkers, we have canes, and we have wheelchairs. So why put this pressure on a dog? This is an involuntary behavior for a dog. Meaning a dog, if you train him to chase things, that's a voluntary behavior that they like to do. So we do that all the time. But to take a dog and require him to do something that's unnatural for them, which is walk slowly, it's sometimes, I'm not saying, it's sometimes too much for the dog. And it's really not fair because you don't really need them. Is there something else? Is there another device that you can open your refrigerator with and yet then put the pressure on the dog?
Right, right. And that reduces the frustration on the part of the owner too. And you're trying to get your dog to do something and they don't have the capacity to do it, right? So what are some of the things that you see in when people call you for training issues, right? What are some of the average miscommunication pieces that happen in a home? Like some of the common behaviors and how they're miscommunicated.
Right. Well, number one, we have gone in this now, we talk about helicopter parents, right? What we've done to what we're doing to children now, within my own family, right? We dress kids up. They look like mummies so they can go outside, but then they're getting yelled at not to get wet. And we're asking them to do things that, number one, isn't fun for them.
Right.
It's not fun. If a kid wants to fall in mud and get dirty, that's fun for them. Parents are our expectations of them. We don't make our children be the guardian of the house. So I can't tell my granddaughter, give her a flashlight and say, I see something in the backyard or I hear a noise in the basement, go check it out. We wouldn't do that. But yet we want our dogs to be jogging partners. We want them to be a guardian of the house. We want them to bark when people come. We want them to watch Dancing with the Stars with us. We want them to go hiking, boating. This is impossible. It's too much, Jackie.
So we're asking dogs to be something that they don't want to be or they can't be. Right. And I think that relates to behavior issues. Like sometimes it's just nice to just let a dog be themselves. Right. And that doesn't mean to destroy your house, but maybe you just need to back off on asking them or expecting them to do all of these things that are human things that are not necessarily dog things. Right. And that's where I think we go wrong.
Jackie, you're absolutely right. Just one thing that I'm thinking about this vision. I was sitting waiting for an Uber yesterday in front of a building with one of these glass revolving doors, a revolving glass door. So think of that for what is a revolving glass door to a dog. And I watched person after person trying to push their dog through the revolving door. The dog he's hitting in the glass because you don't see it. So his nose is smashing into the glass because he sees right through it. So glass is a foreign object for a dog. And then the back is swinging and pushing his ass forward.
Right. So the dog's fearful. I mean, even a service dog, they're not born with a different brain.
Right. Their brains are identical. That's a very good point. Right. I know we're wrapping up. But a dog brain is identical, whether it's a pit bull or a poodle. They're identical. Service dogs don't come from a special planet. They're dogs. They can be found at your local shelter. But we're asking too much. The dog's brain is only capable of certain things. It has not evolved like our human brain, where it's full of emotion and all these kind of toxic things. So dogs are just dogs, whether they're a pug or a German Shepherd, their brains are the same. Leave them alone. As we say at Houndstown, let them come hump, jump, and dump. That's what they want to do. There's no more. Don't scream. Don't yell. Leave them alone. Get off your ass. Get your remote control. Right, Jackie?
Yeah. So dogs have limits to what they can do. Limits. It's just like in your obligation as an owner of a dog is to also allow that dog to have fun. And that dogs, need to interact in their own way. And sometimes we just project ourselves way too in our expectations and our needs way too much on dogs. So we are advocates of not doing that.
Helicopter dog owners, leave the dog alone. Let them dig a hole in your backyard. Don't let them do that. That's a natural fun for them. Don't overdo it. It really is toxic. And it's just, this is why I will tell you, Houndstown, whether you believe it or not, is that psychological outlet for them to come here and not be screamed at, yelled at. They come, they pee on the floor, no consequences. They have their experience. They sniff each other's private parts, no yelling, no screaming. They're allowed to do it. All right, we got to wrap up.
All right, let's wrap it up. So Catch us every Monday night at 8 o'clock right here on the Dish on Dogs podcast on Facebook. You can also catch us on YouTube on the Dish on Dogs and iTunes, Spotify, and all your other podcast platforms. We'll see everybody next Monday.
All right. Thank you. Good.